This is pretty incredible. Influential and respected Senator Chuck Schumer says passing Obamacare was a mistake and not what the middle class wanted. That silence you hear is Democratic political operatives nationwide trying desperately to catch their breath.
Democrats blew the opportunity the American people gave them. We took their mandate and put all of our focus on the wrong problem: health care reform. Americans were crying out for the end to the recession, for better wages and more jobs, not changes in health care.
Ed Hasselmeyer, a fellow at the Heritage Foundation, joins me now with more. And I got to imagine that people on both sides, whether you support the Affordable Care Act or hate the Affordable Care Act, are shocked that he would say this, are they?
I don't know. I think he's being refreshingly honest about the whole thing. I mean, clearly the polling back in 2009 showed that the public was focused on the economy, not health care, so he's right about that. It's kind of shocking because it's kind of like, I don't know, Napoleon's generals, saying, well, gee, back in 1812, maybe we shouldn't have invaded Russia. Maybe we should have done something else instead when we had that big army. It's a little late for that, but yeah, things have not worked out well.
Well, what would the economy look like today if Congress had focused on just that and not the Affordable Care Act?
Well, that's a good question, because just focusing on the economy doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do the right things to stimulate the economy. Remember, before they did the Affordable Care Act, they had a so-called stimulus bill, but it really wasn't geared to economic stimulus, even supply side or Keynesian demand side stimulus. It was geared really to passing a bunch of pet projects that they'd been trying to pass for 20 years and didn't have a majority to pass. So it's not clear that they would have made a huge amount of progress, but that's clearly where the voters were, and I think that's clearly where the voters are today. I mean, that's really the other thing to read into what Senator Schumer's saying. Today, 5 years later, the voters are still looking for an economic recovery, and Obamacare keeps hitting new lows in opinion polls.
Well, when you bring up Obamacare, December 9th, we're going to have Jonathan Gruber testifying before Congress, Mr. Humility himself and humbleness. Is Senator Schumer trying to get out of what can only be, when that man opens his mouth, not Schumer, but Gruber, it's just like people become infuriated. So is Schumer trying to create distance for himself? I mean, what does he gain by doing this?
I'm not sure that Senator Schumer's comments were connected with Jonathan Gruber. I think they were really more reflective of what happened in the elections we just had, where it's very clear with the drubbing that the Democrats got, the Republicans picking up the Senate and increasing their House majority. It's very clear that the public is opposed to Obamacare and still is looking for improvement in the economy and is not looking to the Democrats to provide it. They don't see that coming from President Obama and the Democrats in Congress, so they went with the Republicans.
Okay, two-part question for you now. Washington Times reports that perhaps an unintended consequence of the president's orders on immigration and immigration reform have created a $3,000 incentive for employers to hire people who are illegal aliens, undocumented aliens, as opposed to people who are citizens of the United States. So one, how do you deal with that? And then two, if you're a Republican and want to work with Schumer, and Schumer may want to work with you to reform Obamacare, how do you do that?
Well, at some point, to answer your second question, if there are folks on the Democratic side who are serious about reforming it, if you look and you say, well, what are the problems and what would you do? You basically walk yourself into a place where you're sort of doing repeal and replace in pieces. In other words, why do we have all the problems with the exchange and a lot of those things? Well, it's a very complicated tax subsidy. If you simplify the tax subsidy and give it to everybody, not just a few people, which is what the Republicans have been saying for years, you fix a problem. So, you could say, if you're a Democrat, well, we're fixing a problem. If you're a Republican, well, we're repealing and replacing. In the end, you sort of walk to the same place. The immigrant issue is not clear to me, because the law says that if someone is not lawfully resident, they can't get subsidies. So the question is, does the president's amnesty confer on those people lawful residency? If it does, then those people do qualify for subsidies, and their employers would be fined if they weren't given coverage. if the law gives them amnesty by not prosecuting them, but they're still technically not lawfully present, then no, they don't get subsidies, and yes, the employer may be able to get away with hiring them and not being penalized for not offering them coverage. So it's really, and the other point is simply that the Treasury Department, because this is a tax code issue, Treasury Department is the one that has to come up with some rule on this. And we haven't seen anything.
Unfortunately, at that point, it just seems like a deeper mess. Ed, I'm going to have to let you go, but thank you for joining us. And I got a feeling we're going to be hearing that soundbite from Senator Sunday as we head towards the 2016 elections, but I don't want to ruin people's holidays and talk about politics for 2016, so I'm going to let you go.
Okay.